The unthinkable happened today. The World Trade Center, both towers, gone.
Believe that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. Looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning.
It was devastating as it unfolded, but only now, hours later, under the harsh lights of rescue vehicles, is the true horrifying breadth of the terror becoming clear.
9/11 attack background when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979. Soon after the invasion, Osama bin Laden traveled to Afghanistan and helped organize Arab Mujahideen to resist the communist invaders Soviet Union until their exit from the country in 1989. During that time, bin Laden, together with Abdullah Azzam, formed the Maktab al-Qidamat, MAC, in 1984, an organization to support Arab Mujahideen who came to join the jihad in Afghanistan. Foundation of Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was founded by Osama bin Laden in 1988. The group emerged from the Afghan resistance against the Soviet invasion. In the 1980s, Al-Qaeda's primary goal is to establish a global Islamic state ruled by their interpretation of Islamic law. They aim to remove what they view as corrupt or un-Islamic governments, particularly in Muslim-majority countries, and oppose the presence of Western forces in these countries. Gulf War, 1990, Iraqi forces, led by Saddam Hussein, invaded the neighboring country of Kuwait. The invasion was met with international condemnation as it violated Kuwait's sovereignty. Operation Desert Shield. In response to the Iraqi invasion, the United States, along with a coalition of countries, initiated Operation Desert Shield to defend Saudi Arabia and prepare for the possibility of a military intervention. The coalition included countries like the United Kingdom, France, Saudi Arabia, and others. Operation Desert Storm. On January 17, 1991, the coalition launched Operation Desert Storm, a massive aerial and ground offensive to liberate Kuwait. This operation aimed to push Iraqi forces out of Kuwait and ultimately bring an end to the conflict. In 1991, a ceasefire was declared, effectively ending the active combat phase of the war. Iraq agreed to comply with UN resolutions, including the withdrawal from Kuwait.
The United States and its coalition allies are committed to enforcing the United Nations resolutions that call for Saddam Hussein to immediately and unconditionally leave Kuwait.
Warn INFG of Laden to USA. Osama bin Laden warned America to leave Saudi Arabia because he belongs to Wahhabi sect, and according to him, the Saudia is a very owner-able place because Makkah and Medina is there, and no other human can be bare in this place. So America should have to leave. In 1996, bin Laden issued his first fatwa, calling for American soldiers to leave Saudi Arabia. In a second 1998 fatwa, bin Laden outlined his objections to American foreign policy with respect to the State of Israel, as well as the continued presence of American troops in Saudi Arabia after the Gulf War.
In response to continued threats in the region, I've ordered the deployment to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia of 2 additional fighter squadrons and supporting personnel.
A subscriber to the Athari, literalist, and Wahhabi school of Islamic theology, bin Laden used Islamic Quran texts to exhort Muslims to attack Americans until the stated grievances were reversed. According to bin Laden, Muslim legal scholars had, throughout Islamic history, unanimously agreed that the jihad is an individual duty if the enemy destroys the Muslim countries. Planning of attack. The attacks were conceived by Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who first presented it to Osama bin Laden in 1996. At that time, bin Laden and Al-Qaeda were in a period of transition, having just relocated back to Afghanistan from Sudan. The 1998 African embassy bombings and bin Laden's February 1998 fatwa marked a turning point of Al-Qaeda's terrorist operation, as bin Laden became intent on attacking the United States. In late or early 1999, bin Laden gave approval to go forward with organizing the Plot Muhammad bin Laden and Mohammed Atef, the deputy of bin Laden, held a series of meetings in early 1999. Atef provided operational support, including target selections and helping arrange travel for the hijackers. Bin Laden overruled Mohammed, rejecting potential targets such as the U.S. Bank Tower in Los Angeles for lack of time. Bin Laden provided leadership and financial support and was involved in selecting participants. He initially selected Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Mihdar, both experienced jihadists who had fought in Bosnia. Hazmi and Mihdar arrived in the United States in mid-January 2000. In early 2000, Hazmi and Mihdar took flying lessons in San Diego, California. Both spoke little English, performed poorly in flying lessons, and eventually served as secondary muscle hijackers. In late 1999, a group of men from Hamburg, Germany, arrived in Afghanistan. Bin Laden selected these men because they were educated, could speak English, and had experience living in the West. New recruits were routinely screened for special skills, and Al-Qaeda leaders consequently discovered that Hani Hanjour already had a commercial pilot's license. Mohammed later said that he helped the hijackers blend in by teaching them how to order food in restaurants and dress in Western clothing. Bin al-Shib also passed along bin Laden's wish for the attacks to be carried out as soon as possible. Some of the hijackers received passports from corrupt Saudi officials who were family members or used fraudulent passports to gain entry. There have been a few theories that 9/11 was selected by the hijackers as the date of the attack because of its resemblance to 911, the phone number used to report emergencies in the United States. Attack.
Now, some very, very sketchy details reaching us here at Sky Centre. Important enough to bring to you, though, at this early stage. We believe that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center in New York.
Early on the morning of September 11th, 2001, 19 hijackers took control of 4 commercial airliners, 2 Boeing 757s and 2 Boeing 767s, en route to California. 3 of them headed to LAX in Los Angeles and 1 to SFO in San Francisco, after takeoffs from Logan International Airport in Boston, Massachusetts, Newark Liberty International Airport in Newark, New Jersey, and Washington Dulles International Airport in Loudoun and Fairfax counties in Virginia. Large planes with long coast-to-coast flights were selected for hijacking because they would have more fuel. The 4 crashes. At 7:59 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 took off from Logan International Airport in Boston. 15 minutes into the flight, 5 hijackers armed with box cutters took over the plane, injuring at least 3 people before forcing their way into the cockpit. The terrorists also displayed an apparent explosive device in order to frighten the hostages into submission, while additionally spraying mace into the cabin to further hinder any efforts to resist. Back at Logan, United Airlines Flight 175 took off at 8:14 a.m., approximately the same time as Flight 11's hijacking. Hundreds of miles southwest at Dulles International Airport in Fairfax and Loudoun counties, Virginia, American Airlines. Flight 77 left the runway at 8:20 a.m. Flight 175's journey proceeded normally for 28 minutes until 8:42 a.m., when another group of 5 hijacked the plane, murdering both pilots and stabbing several crew members before assuming control of the aircraft. As was the case with Flight 11, the hijackers used bomb threats to instill fear into the passengers and crew and sprayed chemical weapons to disable any opposition. Concurrently, United Airlines Flight 93 departed from Newark International Airport in New Jersey, originally scheduled to pull away from the gate at 8:00 a.m. The plane was running 42 minutes late. At 8:46 a.m., Flight 11 became the first plane to reach its target when it was deliberately crashed into the north face of the World Trade Center's North Tower, although the initial presumption by many was that this was merely an accident. At 8:51 a.m., shortly after the North Tower was struck, and only minutes following the hijacking of Flight 175, American Airlines Flight 77 was also taken over by another group of 5 who forcibly entered the cockpit 31 minutes after takeoff. Although the hijackers were equipped with knives, there were no reports of anyone on board actually being stabbed, unlike the first 2 planes, nor did the 2 people who made phone calls mention the use of mace or a bomb threat of any kind.
Came in like a missile, like a fireball missile across from the New York harbor side, I guess from the Newark direction. It came in like a spear. It just speared through the building like a fireball.
You know, you can see the cut of the incision into the building.
17 minutes after the first plane crashed into the North Tower, Flight 175 was flown into the South Tower's southern facade at 9:03 a.m., instantly proving to the entire world that the first crash was not an accident, but that a terrorist attack was underway. After waiting 46 minutes to make their move, a holdup that proved disastrous for the terrorists when combined with the delayed takeoff from the runway, 4 men aboard Flight 93 struck suddenly, killing at least one passenger before storming the cockpit and seizing control of the plane at 9:28 a.m., turning the plane eastbound and setting course for Washington, D.C. Much like their counterparts on the first 2 flights, the fourth team also used bomb threats to get their way and again filled the cabin with mace. 9 minutes after Flight 93's hijacking, Flight 77 was crashed into the west side of the Pentagon. Because of the 2 delays, the passengers and crew of Flight 93 had time to be made aware of the previous attacks through phone calls to the ground. Knowing their lives were forfeited rendered the bomb threat moot, and an uprising was hastily organized in the hopes of taking control of the aircraft, with an assault on the hijackers being launched at 9:57 a.m. Within minutes, they had fought their way to the front of the cabin and began breaking down the cockpit door. Fearing their captives would gain the upper hand, the hijackers rolled the plane and pitched it into a nosedive, crashing into a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, southeast of Pittsburgh, at 10:03 a.m.
Sideways, so the plane was slightly on its side, and that's why it made me think maybe it was in distress. But then when it obviously hit, there was almost no doubt that it was intentional.
The plane was around 20 minutes away from reaching D.C. at the time of the crash, and its target is believed to have been either the Capitol building or the White House.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. We're looking at a live picture from Washington, and there is smoke pouring out of the Pentagon.
Some passengers and crew members who called from the aircraft using the cabin airphone service and mobile phones provided details. Several hijackers were aboard each plane. They used mace, tear gas, or pepper spray to overcome attendants, and some people aboard had been stabbed. Reports indicated hijackers stabbed and killed pilots, flight attendants, and 1 or more passengers. According to the 9/11 Commission's final report, the hijackers had recently purchased multifunction hand tools and assorted Leatherman-type utility knives with locking blades, which were not forbidden to passengers at the time, but were not found among the possessions left behind by the hijackers. A flight attendant on Flight 11, a passenger on Flight 175, and passengers on Flight 93 said the hijackers had bombs, but one of the passengers said he thought the bombs were fake. The FBI found no traces of explosives at the crash sites, and the 9/11 Commission concluded that the bombs were probably fake on at least 2 of the hijacked flights, American 11 and United 93. The terrorists tried to ensure nobody would resist by claiming over the PA system that they were taking hostages and were returning to the airport to have a ransom demand met, an obvious attempt to deceive those on board into staying put by way of a false hope. Both of these attempts fell on deaf ears, however, as the hijacker pilots in both instances respectively keyed the wrong switch and mistakenly transmitted their messages to ATC instead of the people on the plane as intended, in the process tipping off the flight controllers that the planes had been hijacked. Security camera footage of American Airlines Flight 77 crashing into the Pentagon. The plane collides with the Pentagon approximately 86 seconds after the start of the recording. 3 buildings in the World Trade Center collapsed due to fire-induced structural failure. Although the South Tower was struck 17 minutes after the North Tower, the plane's impact zone was far lower, at a much faster speed, and into a corner, with the unevenly balanced additional structural weight causing it to collapse first at 9:59 a.m., having burned for 56 minutes in the fire caused by the crash of United Airlines Flight 175 and the explosion of its fuel. The North Tower lasted another 29 minutes before collapsing at 10:28 a.m., 1 hour and 42 minutes after being struck by American Airlines Flight 11. When the North Tower collapsed, debris fell on the nearby 7 World Trade Center building, 7 WTC, damaging the building and starting fires. These fires burned for nearly 7 hours, compromising the building's structural integrity, and 7 WTC collapsed at 5:21 p.m. The west side of the Pentagon sustained significant damage. Terrorist attacks in the United States resulted in a significant loss of life and injuries.
Limited service. New Jersey. If you want to get to New Jersey, folks, you have to go to 34th and 11th at the Jacob Javits Center. They will assist you getting to New Jersey. Long Island Railroad, limited service. City subways. Not working.
The attacks consisted of 4 coordinated suicide bombings by the extremist group Al-Qaeda. Here are the approximate figures for the casualties. World Trade Center, Twin Towers in New York City. Deaths. Approximately 2,177 people were killed, including passengers and crew on the hijacked planes, first responders, and civilians in the buildings and the surrounding area. Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. Deaths. 125 people were killed in the Pentagon, including both military and civilian personnel. Many others were injured, but a specific injury count is not readily available. Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Deaths. 40 passengers and crew on United Airlines. Flight 93 lost their lives when the plane crashed in a field. Their actions prevented the plane from reaching its intended target, believed to be either the U.S. Capitol or the White House. These figures represent the tragic loss of life and injuries resulting from the 9/11 attacks. It was a devastating event in American history and had a profound impact on the world.